The bridge of the Asterisk Sentinel's edge hummed with the familiar white noise of deep space patrol, a symphony of recycled air, quantum processors, and the occasional beep from navigation systems that had been mapping the same empty coordinates for 3 months straight. Captain Elena Vasquez leaned back in her command chair, watching the holographic display paint their sector in soothing blues and greens. Another day, another handful of cosmic dust particles to catalog in their patrol logs. "Captain," Lieutenant Torres called from the sensor station, his voice carrying that particular tone that meant either imminent death or another false alarm from the gravitational wave detectors. "I'm picking up something unusual on long-range sensors." Elena suppressed a yawn. "Define unusual, Torres. Are we talking asteroid with an interesting mineral composition unusual, or space pirates with a death wish unusual?" "More like unidentified vessel approaching the human boundary unusual, ma'am." The bridge fell silent except for the persistent hum of life support systems. Elena felt her pulse quicken as she straightened in her chair. In her 12 years of patrol duty, she'd encountered exactly 4 unauthorized vessels attempting to cross into human space. All 4 had been reduced to their component atoms within minutes of detection, as per Standard Defense Protocol 7. The rule was simple, absolute, and had kept humanity safe since the establishment of the territorial boundaries. No one enters human space uninvited and returns alive. "Distance and trajectory?" Elena asked, her training overriding the sudden spike of adrenaline. "Approximately 2 light hours out, maintaining steady approach vector toward checkpoint Gamma 7. Current speed suggests arrival in roughly 6 hours at present velocity." Ensign Park, fresh from the academy and still enthusiastic about regulations, piped up from the communications console. "Should I transmit the standard warning, Captain? You know, halt, identify yourself, prepare to be obliterated for the glory of humanity and all that." Elena almost smiled. Park's irreverent summary of Protocol 7 wasn't technically accurate, but it captured the spirit nicely. "Send the warning, Ensign. Full broadcast spectrum, all known languages plus the mathematical sequences. Give them 30 minutes to respond or change course." "Aye, Captain, though I have to ask, has anyone ever actually turned around after getting the warning?" "Twice," Elena replied, settling back to watch the tactical display. "Both times they were human vessels with malfunctioning transponders. Everyone else." She made a small explosive gesture with her hands. Commander Sarah Chen, Elena's second-in-command, moved to stand beside the captain's chair. "What do you think we're looking at? Pirates? Another one of those religious cults trying to find their promised land beyond human borders. Could be anything. Remember that group last year who thought they'd discovered the cosmic frequency of enlightenment? Took them 3 days to stop broadcasting their manifesto after we vaporized their ship." Torres cleared his throat. "Captain, I'm getting some very strange readings from this contact. The vessel's configuration doesn't match anything in our databases. The hull signature is organic." Elena frowned. "Organic how? Are we talking about a ship with biological components, or did someone strap an engine to a space whale?" "Unknown, ma'am. The spectral analysis suggests some kind of living metal, but that's theoretically impossible. The energy patterns are unlike anything I've seen. It's almost like the entire ship is breathing." Commander Chen leaned over Tor's shoulder to examine the sensor data. "Could be some new stealth technology. Pirates have been getting creative lately, especially after we developed those new quantum tracking systems." "Or," Park interjected with the confidence only possessed by 22-year-old ensigns, "it could be actual aliens. You know, the kind we've been wondering about for the past few centuries." The bridge erupted in chuckles. Elena grinned despite herself. "Ensign Park, in the unlikely event that we've just encountered humanity's first alien contact, I'll personally recommend you for promotion. However, given our luck, it's probably another smuggling operation with delusions of grandeur." 28 minutes later, Tors announced that the mysterious vessel had not responded to their warnings and showed no signs of altering course. Elena felt the familiar weight of command settle on her shoulders. Protocol 7 was clear, absolute, and had never been questioned in the 3 decades since its implementation. Unauthorized vessels were to be destroyed immediately, no exceptions, no hesitation. All stations prepare for engagement, Elena commanded. Charge primary weapons, bring shields to full power. Lieutenant Tors, continue monitoring for any changes in the contact's behavior. The Sentinel's Edge transformed from a sleepy patrol vessel into a precision instrument of destruction within minutes. Weapon systems that had been powered down for months roared to life, their crystalline matrices humming with barely contained energy. The ship's AI began running final targeting calculations, adjusting for stellar drift and quantum fluctuations that could affect weapon accuracy across such vast distances. Captain Tors called out, his voice tight with confusion. The contact is doing something. Power levels are dropping across their entire vessel. They're practically going dark. Elena leaned forward. Evasive maneuvers. No, ma'am. They're maintaining course and speed, but their energy signature is becoming almost undetectable. It's like they're shutting down everything except life support. Commander Chen raised an eyebrow. That's either the most sophisticated surrender I've ever seen, or the most elaborate suicide. Before Elena could respond, Park nearly jumped out of his chair. Captain, incoming transmission from the contact. They're broadcasting on standard human frequencies, but the language structure is unusual. Put it through, Ensign. The bridge speakers crackled to life, and a voice filled the space between them. Melodious, distinctly feminine, and speaking in what sounded like archaic human dialect mixed with unfamiliar intonations. Greetings, children of Terra. I am alone aboard this vessel and mean no harm to your domain. I surrender myself to your judgment and request safe passage to speak with your leaders. I have traveled far and waited long for this moment. The bridge fell silent. Elena stared at the communication console, her mind racing through possibilities. The voice was undeniably human in its basic structure, yet something about the cadence and pronunciation suggested someone who had learned the language from very old sources. Tors, Elena said quietly, what's the status of their weapons systems? Completely offline, Captain. If they're armed, they've powered down everything. The only active systems appear to be life support and communication. Elena made a decision that would later be debated in military academies for decades. Change course to intercept. We board and investigate before taking any irreversible action. Commander Chen looked at her with barely concealed alarm. Elena, Protocol 7 explicitly states. I know what it states, Sarah, but something about this doesn't fit the pattern. Call it intuition, call it curiosity, but we're going to take a look before we start shooting. 2 hours later, the Sentinel's Edge hung in space beside the most beautiful vessel Elena had ever seen. The alien ship, and she was now certain it was alien, resembled a living organism more than any human construction. Its hull curved and flowed like sculpted water frozen in motion, covered in patterns that seemed to pulse with soft bioluminescent light. There were no visible weapons ports, no recognizable engine systems, no harsh angles or mechanical joints. Boarding party ready, Captain, Commander Chen reported, though her voice carried obvious reluctance. Elena adjusted her sidearm and checked her environmental suit one final time. Remember, we go in assuming peaceful contact until proven otherwise, but stay alert. If this goes sideways, I want everyone ready to evacuate immediately. The airlock cycled, and Elena stepped into the alien vessel with her heart pounding against her ribs. The interior was as organic as the exterior, with walls that curved seamlessly into each other and surfaces that seemed to glow with their own internal light. The air was breathable, their sensors had confirmed that, but it carried strange, sweet scents that reminded Elena of flowers she couldn't identify. They found her in what might have been the ship's control room, though it bore no resemblance to any human bridge. She stood with her back to them, hands clasped behind her back, apparently studying a display that showed swirling patterns of light and color. When she turned to face them, Elena felt her breath catch. The woman was undeniably beautiful, with features that were almost perfectly human except for her ears, long, pointed, and elegantly shaped in a way that no human surgeon could have achieved. Her hair was the color of starlight, silver white but somehow luminous, and her eyes held depths that seemed to reflect centuries of experience. She smiled at their obvious surprise and said, in that same archaic accent, "I've been waiting 300 years for humans to find me." The interrogation room aboard the Asterisk Sentinels Edge had been designed for intimidation. Stark white walls, harsh lighting, and furniture bolted to the floor in case prisoners decided to redecorate with violence. Lyra, as she had introduced herself, sat in the metal chair with the relaxed posture of someone attending a casual dinner party rather than facing potential execution. She had declined the offered restraints, pointing out with amusement that if she had wanted to harm anyone, she wouldn't have surrendered her ship first. "So," Elena began, consulting her standard interrogation protocol on her tablet, "let's start with the basics. Name, species, and point of origin." "Lyra of the Ethani, from a world you would find unpronounceable even if I told you its name. Think of it as the place where your nightmares about organic technology would feel right at home." She gestured toward the bulkhead separating them from her ship. "As for point of origin for this particular journey, I've been wandering your local galactic arm for the better part of 3 centuries, waiting for humans to expand far enough that I could arrange this little meet and greet." Commander Chen, who had positioned herself near the door in what she probably thought was a subtle tactical stance, leaned forward. 300 years. That's impossible. Our expansion into this sector only began 40 years ago." Lyra's laugh reminded Elena of wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Oh, my dear Commander, you humans have such adorable confidence in your own timeline. Your people have been expanding for centuries, but you've been doing it so loudly that we've been tracking your progress since before your great-great-grandparents were born. Honestly, your species treats space travel like a marching band parade. Lots of noise, bright lights, and absolute certainty that everyone should be paying attention." Elena set down her tablet. Standard protocol was clearly inadequate for this situation. "You're telling us your people have been watching human expansion for 3 centuries. Watching, cataloging, occasionally placing bets on which direction you'd go next. My cousin Thuron won quite a lot of currency when he correctly predicted you'd name a planet, New Detroit, and then spend 50 years arguing about whether the old Detroit was worth commemorating in the first place." Tors, who had been monitoring from the observation booth, spoke through the intercom. "Captain, her bio readings are consistent with her statements. Heart rate, neural activity, stress indicators. She's telling the truth as she understands it." "Of course I'm telling the truth," Lyra said, addressing the hidden speaker with perfect accuracy. "Lying would be counterproductive at this stage, and frankly, reality is strange enough without embellishment. Your Lieutenant Tors has lovely technique with the bioscanners, by the way. Very gentle touch for military equipment." Elena rubbed her temples. "How do you know his name? How do you know any of our names?" "Your communication systems are charmingly unencrypted once you understand the underlying mathematical principles. Plus, your ensign Park has been broadcasting his personal log entries on an open channel for the past hour. Apparently, he's very excited about First Contact Protocol and keeps practicing his formal greeting speeches." From somewhere in the ship's corridors, they could hear Park's muffled voice rehearsing what sounded like a welcome address to the Galactic Federation. "That boy needs hobbies," Elena muttered. "I rather like him," Lyra replied. "His enthusiasm is refreshing after decades of monitoring your military frequencies. Do you know how many ways your species has devised to say, destroy the enemy in official communications? I started keeping a list after the first 100 variations. Commander Chen stepped closer to the table. If your people have been watching us for so long, why make contact now? Why surrender instead of approaching through diplomatic channels? Lyra's expression grew more serious, though her tone remained light. Have you met your own diplomatic corps? Lovely people, I'm sure, but they have a tendency to shoot first and ask questions during the funeral service. Your entire species operates on the principle that strangers are enemies until proven otherwise, and the burden of proof involves surviving increasingly creative attempts at annihilation. Elena found herself almost smiling despite the circumstances. You're not wrong about our defensive protocols. Defensive, Lyra repeated, savoring the word. You call it defensive when you've established a kill zone around your entire territory and advertise it as a feature rather than a problem. That's like calling a moat filled with acid sharks a swimming pool with. The command deck of the Asterisk Sentinel's Edge had transformed into controlled chaos within minutes of the alert. Officers rushed between stations. Holographic displays flickered with incoming data streams, and the general atmosphere suggested everyone was trying very hard not to panic while simultaneously preparing for the end of human civilization as they knew it. Elena burst through the doors with Lyra close behind, no longer bothering with the pretense of prisoner and captor. The situation had evolved beyond standard protocols the moment an entire fleet materialized at their doorstep. Report, Elena barked, sliding into her command chair. Torres didn't look up from his sensor array. 47 vessels, Captain. Configuration matches our guest ship but scaled up dramatically. The largest one is approximately 3 kilometers long and appears to be breathing. Breathing? Commander Chen asked, moving to her station. The hull is expanding and contracting in a regular rhythm. Either it's a living ship or someone has a very disturbing sense of humor about starship design. Lyra settled into an empty chair with the casual air of someone attending a mildly interesting lecture. That would be the Asterisk heart of the Deep Current Asterisk, flagship of my cousin Admiral Keitha. She always was dramatic about entrances. The breathing effect is actually quite practical. It helps regulate internal pressure and provides a psychological advantage during negotiations. Park, who had arrived on the bridge still holding what appeared to be a manual on intergalactic diplomacy, stared at the tactical display. 47 ships. Are they here for you? Technically, they're here because of me, Lyra replied. I may have understated the urgency of my mission when I mentioned waiting for a signal. My people operate on slightly different temporal concepts than humans. When they didn't hear from me within their expected time frame, they assumed I'd been vaporized according to your charming customs. Elena felt a headache building behind her eyes. How long were they supposed to wait? About 6 months in your time measurement. I've been here 4 hours. 4 hours versus 6 months, Elena repeated slowly. That's quite a miscalculation. Ethani temporal perception is based on stellar cycles rather than planetary rotation. It's entirely possible they thought I'd been dead for decades from their perspective. Time is relative, Captain, especially when you're dealing with beings who measure their lifespans in millennia. Commander Chen was studying the tactical readouts with growing concern. Captain, their energy signatures are off the scale. If those are weapons systems, they could reduce this entire system to component particles. Oh, they could definitely do that, Lyra agreed cheerfully. But they won't. Ethani philosophy prohibits the destruction of potential allies, and you haven't technically threatened me yet. Though I should mention that Admiral Keitha has very strong feelings about punctuality. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing what Elena could only describe as the most magnificent and terrifying sight of her career. The Ethani fleet hung in space like a collection of living jewels, their hulls pulsing with synchronized bioluminescent patterns that painted the darkness in waves of blue, green, and gold. Each ship was unique in design, flowing and organic, as if they had been sculpted by artists who understood both beauty and lethality. "Incoming transmission," Park announced, his voice cracking slightly with excitement and terror. "Put it through," Elena commanded. The view screen shifted to show the interior of what was unmistakably an alien bridge, all flowing curves and living surfaces that seemed to respond to the presence of their occupants. At its center stood a figure who could only be Admiral Keitha, tall, elegant, with the same pointed ears as Lyra, but an aura of authority that made Elena instinctively straighten her uniform. "Greetings, humans of the vessel Sentinels Edge *", Admiral Keitha said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. "I am Admiral Keitha of the Ethani Deep Fleet. You are currently harboring my cousin, and I demand her immediate return." Elena glanced at Lyra, who was making exaggerated apologetic gestures behind the camera pickup. "Admiral, your cousin is here voluntarily. She surrendered to us and has been cooperating with our investigation." "Investigation?" Admiral Keitha's expression shifted to what Elena hoped was amusement rather than homicidal intent. "You are investigating Lyra. How delightfully presumptuous. What conclusions have you reached about someone who has forgotten more about your species than your entire scientific establishment has ever learned?" "Well," Elena began, then realized she had no adequate response to that particular question. Lyra stood and moved into the view screen's range. "Hello, Keitha, you're early." "Early?" Admiral Keitha's composure cracked slightly. "Lyra, you are supposed to establish contact and report within one temporal cycle. We've been monitoring this system for 3 cycles without a word from you. I've been here 4 hours. 4? Admiral Keitha paused, and Elena could practically see her doing temporal calculations. "Oh, human time measurement. I forgot they use such absurdly brief intervals." Commander Chen stepped forward. "Admiral, perhaps we could discuss this situation more calmly. Our protocols require—" "Your protocols," Admiral Keitha interrupted, "involve destroying any ship that enters your territory. By your own laws, Lyra should have been reduced to her component atoms hours ago. The fact that she remains intact suggests either remarkable restraint or spectacular incompetence." Torres chose that moment to clear his throat. "Actually, ma'am, we did consider the whole component atoms option, but she surrendered before we could implement standard procedures." "Ah," Admiral Keitha said, nodding gravely. "The diplomatic surrender gambit. Lyra always did enjoy complicated solutions to simple problems." Elena was beginning to feel like she was moderating a family dispute between beings who could casually erase her civilization. "If we could focus on the current situation." "The current situation," Admiral Keitha continued, "is that we have urgent business to discuss, and you have graciously provided us with an opportunity to do so without resorting to the usual tedious process of fighting our way through your defensive perimeter." "Fighting through our—" Elena trailed off as the implications hit her. "You could have bypassed our defenses entirely." Lyra winced. "I probably should have mentioned that earlier. Ethani ships exist in multiple dimensional phases simultaneously. Your sensors can only detect us when we choose to be detected. It's rather like trying to catch a shadow with a butterfly net." Park, who had been frantically taking notes throughout the exchange, looked up with wide eyes. "So when you surrendered—" "I was making a grand gesture of respect for human territorial sovereignty, while simultaneously demonstrating that your defenses are more of a polite suggestion than an actual barrier," Lyra finished. It seemed like a good compromise between honesty and diplomacy. Elena sat back in her command chair, feeling the weight of command multiply exponentially. The emergency session of the Human Territorial Defense Council, convened aboard Kepler Station with all the pomp and bureaucratic efficiency of a funeral organized by competing undertakers. Elena found herself seated at a massive conference table, surrounded by admirals, generals, and politicians who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else in the universe. Admiral Harrison, the station commander, glared across the table at Lyra as if she personally responsible for every inconvenience in his 60-year military career. Let me understand this correctly. You want us to abandon our most fundamental defense protocol, the complete destruction of unauthorized intruders, to form an alliance with beings who have been spying on us for centuries. Well, Lyra replied, settling comfortably into her chair, when you put it that way, it does sound rather unreasonable. Perhaps we should phrase it as selective suspension of mutual annihilation policies in favor of continued universal existence. It has a nicer ring to it. General Morrison, a man whose face appeared to have been carved from disapproving granite, leaned forward. Our intelligence reports indicate that your fleet could have destroyed our defenses at any time. Why should we trust beings who have been deceiving us from the beginning? Because, Lyra said with exaggerated patience, if we wanted to conquer you, we would have done it centuries ago when your most advanced weapons were chemical rockets and nuclear fission. Honestly, watching your species develop has been like observing extremely violent and creative children discover fire. Elena suppressed a smile, as several council members bristled at the comparison. 3 days of constant briefings had taught her to appreciate Lyra's particular brand of diplomatic honesty. The gravitational distortions have increased by 12% since yesterday, Commander Chen reported from her position at the tactical display. Whatever's causing the reality erasure is definitely accelerating toward our region. Admiral Harrison studied the sensor data, with the expression of someone trying to solve a puzzle made entirely of bad news. Assuming we believe your claims about this reality-eating phenomenon, what exactly do you propose we do about it? Admiral Keitha, attending via holographic projection from her flagship, activated a series of star charts that made Elena's head hurt just looking at them. Our preliminary analysis suggests the anomaly operates by convincing the fundamental forces of the universe that certain regions never existed. It's less an invasion than a cosmic-scale case of selective amnesia. That's impossible, declared Dr. Patricia Reeves, the Council's chief science advisor. You can't simply make reality forget. Doctor, Lyra interrupted gently, with respect, your species thought faster-than-light travel was impossible until you invented it, declared time travel impossible until you accidentally did it twice, and insisted that consciousness couldn't exist without biological substrates until you created artificial intelligence that writes better poetry than most humans. Perhaps we could acknowledge that impossibility is more of a temporary inconvenience than a fundamental law. Dr. Reeves opened her mouth to argue, then closed it with a frustrated expression. Elena stood, feeling the weight of 3 days' worth of impossible decisions. We've spent 72 hours debating the theoretical implications while that thing gets closer. I propose we stop arguing about whether this is possible and start working on solutions. Captain Vasquez, Admiral Harrison said sternly, you're out of line. This council, Elena interrupted, is about to debate our species into extinction. Admiral Keitha, what do you need from us? The Ethani Admiral's holographic image nodded approvingly. Direct action. Refreshing. We need human ships equipped with dimensional phase generators to create a barrier around the anomaly. Your quantum resonance technology, combined with our bio-neural networks, might be able to convince reality to remember what it's trying to forget. General Morrison frowned. You want us to modify our fleet with untested alien technology to fight something that shouldn't exist? Yes, Lyra and Admiral Keitha said simultaneously. Park, who had somehow managed to get assigned as Elena's aide despite his complete lack of relevant experience, raised his hand tentatively. Excuse me, but what if it doesn't work? Then we all get to find out what non-existence feels like, Lyra replied cheerfully, though I suspect it's quite peaceful once you get used to the concept. Elena moved to the main display, watching as the gravitational readings continued their steady increase. How long do we have? At current expansion rates, approximately 6 months before the effect reaches the outer colonies, Admiral Keitha replied. Less if it continues accelerating. The council chamber fell silent except for the steady hum of life support systems and the occasional beep from monitoring equipment. Elena looked around the table at faces that reflected the same mixture of fear and determination she felt building in her own chest. "I have a question," Elena said finally. "Why us? Why does humanity specifically need to be part of this solution?" Admiral Keitha and Lyra exchanged another one of their meaningful glances, this one tinged with what might have been embarrassment. "Because," Lyra said slowly, "when faced with impossible situations, humans have a remarkable tendency to simply refuse to accept them. Your species' complete inability to acknowledge limitations might be exactly what we need to convince the universe not to give up on itself." Dr. Reeves looked up from her data pad. "Are you telling us that our primary contribution to this alliance is being too stubborn to admit defeat?" "Your stubbornness," Admiral Keitha clarified, "combined with a remarkable gift for breaking established rules when they become inconvenient. Ethani philosophy emphasizes harmony with natural forces. Human philosophy appears to emphasize telling natural forces to sit down and behave properly." Elena found herself laughing despite the circumstances. "You want to weaponize human stubbornness against cosmic annihilation." "When you put it that way," Lyra said, grinning, "it sounds almost reasonable." Admiral Harrison stood slowly, his face cycling through several expressions before settling on resigned determination. "Very well. Against my better judgment and every protocol I've sworn to uphold, I'm authorizing a joint fleet operation. God help us all." "Actually," Park interjected, consulting his ever-present manual, "according to the regulations on first contact scenarios, shouldn't we have some kind of formal ceremony? You know, symbolic handshakes, exchange of gifts, that sort of thing." The room erupted in laughter that held equal parts hysteria and relief. Elena watched as the most senior military commanders in human space dissolved into giggles at the thought of protocol requirements for preventing universal annihilation. "Ensign Park," Elena said when the laughter died down, "I hereby promote you to liaison officer for absurd bureaucratic requirements in impossible situations." "Thank you, Captain. Should I prepare the paperwork for that position?" "Absolutely. Make sure to file it in triplicate." 6 weeks later, Elena stood on the bridge of the Asterisk Sentinels, Edge, as part of the largest joint fleet in human history. Human vessels sailed alongside Ethani ships in formations that would have been unthinkable months earlier, their hulls glowing with bio-neural modifications that made them look like mechanical organisms learning to breathe. Dimensional